So the person you see in front of you here is Jesse Berger. Now, he wrote this book, this ditty right here, Magic Internet Money, a book about Bitcoin. And I read this book and I said, look, I got to have Jesse on the show. I've been really wanting to have somebody that's really invested in the Bitcoin community to talk about Bitcoin in general, because obviously with the Coinbase IPO and just I think on LinkedIn where I reside, a lot of people don't know what it's about. They're afraid of it. Like got a lot of like entrenched institutional investment bankers that are talking a lot of smack about it. So I was like, I got to have someone that can explain it simply. And I think this book is a perfect primer for people who are trying to just understand Bitcoin, get in the kind of philosophical background, but also just like what's a good way to Bitcoin 101 without like bludgeoning people to death with it. So I suggest you got to come on the show. And also, there's an article I wrote, probably only like 5 people read it, but it was about Bitcoin and intuition and how Bitcoin is not something that you need to get it as a conceptual thing before some people just like myself, the concept of Bitcoin made me buy. And I think that's all I needed was just a faint realization of what it is. And I'm a maximalist now. So that's why I brought Jesse on the show, and he's like, very busy week. I know he does a book tour and things are just really popping off for Bitcoin. So Jesse, first, thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure, Joe.
And tell me what compelled you to write Magic Internet Money.
Yeah, I always looked at money, I guess, a little differently than most because I started my career at the end of 2006, just as the financial crisis hit. And I remember, I had studied economics in undergrad, so I thought I had at least a baseline understanding of things. And basically, right, everything went crazy, and the Fed came in and said, "Oh, we're gonna do these $600 billion bailout for banks." And I just remember scratching my head and going like, "Where did this money come from?" They're just, pardon me, they're just creating this money from nothing, and they're just going to give it to these select like corporations. I don't remember learning about this, and so I started asking myself the question, like, what is money? And that's, if you have, the book, you showed the front of the book, I'll show the back of the book. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. What is money? So that's the rabbit you chase down the rabbit hole. Like, if you want to start understanding Bitcoin, you should start with a fundamental understanding of like, what is money? Because Bitcoin makes a lot more sense once you really try to understand money. But without it, it's going to be that much more complicated.
Yes. Great premise to start with. And I think money is complicated. So that's part of the reason why people don't want to it's kind of dull. People think it's like boring.
Well, we've been, we born and raised with money just being what it was. It was in the background. It was an afterthought of sorts, right? Everyone sets up their bank account, gets their card, you work for it, you pay your bills with it. It just is, right? It was this baseline assumption that we all had. And, Bitcoin is upsetting that assumption.
Yep. And about the book, how was the response? But I know when did it published? March last year, 2020? When was it?
So I published October 2020.
October. Okay.
So it's been just about 6 months. And also, I realized I didn't quite answer the very first question about what prompted me to write the book. I was given the background, and then we sort of got off track a little bit. I'll try to shorten up the story, but basically learned to ask myself, what is money? Learned to look at economics and monetary systems through, a different lens, basically. And that's predominantly the Austrian economics lens. We don't need to go into all the details of that right now, but it's just a different way of looking at economics. And that's not one that's predominantly taught at academic institutions where I studied. You learn theory in school, but then in practice, things don't quite work the same. So Austrian economics for me really helped reconcile what I was seeing in the real world. And so I became I got into gold. I was a bit of a gold bug because gold at the time was like, oh, this is the good money. This is the best money in the world.
Yeah.
And, we'll fast forward a bunch of years. 2017, I started to buy into Bitcoin and other cryptos. I was exploring those markets. I had a baseline understanding of Bitcoin, which I picked up back in 2011 when Bitcoin was like not first out because it came out in 2009, but when it started to have its own market.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was working at a wealth management firm, and me and a bunch of buddies were just like, oh, maybe we should buy 500 or $1,000 of Bitcoin. It was like $1 or $2. And we're like, yeah, this seems like a good idea. Let's go. And then we were just idiot bankers. We didn't know, how to actually do it. We didn't know how the technology worked. All I understood was that there was 21 million coins, that they were issued on a predetermined schedule. So the monetary policy was determined forever in advance.
Yep.
And that the coins were created at a cost. I understood that mining was, to some degree energy intensive, but I had no idea of the mechanics. And those were the three things that I understood about Bitcoin basically back then. And so, yeah, we were saying we should buy, and then we realized there was no infrastructure to do it, and we wouldn't have known how to keep our keys. If I had bought any, I probably would have lost it. Like 99%, I would have ended up losing it. But so we didn't buy any. It goes from $1 to like, $30. And we think, okay, I guess we missed the boat. And so I don't really think about it for a while. But then fast forward again now to 2017. And, a friend of mine's like, oh yeah, I'm into Bitcoin. I'm into these other cryptos. Like you should, if you understood it a little bit back then, maybe here's how you buy if you want to start buying in. So I started buying in, and, riding the wave of 2017, I was, as I was sort of riding that wave, I was really trying to learn like what's making this whole thing go. So taught myself and started reading up on blockchain, and then I started really combining that with my old roots of like, what is money, and like that knowledge that I had built up, 7 or 8 years prior. And so those were sort of clashing, and but coming together, I should say, not clashing. And also, Bitcoin's infrastructure was developing, the thought leadership in the space was developing. So I'm reading from these amazing, amazing writers who, are just putting these puzzle pieces together in this amazing way. And that resonated with me because of this background that I had. And basically I left my job in 2018, and I was like, okay, I need to contribute to Bitcoin. I get it. Like it's making sense to me. I can see that this thing is going to change the world for all the best reasons. How do I communicate this? And initially I started working on like a PowerPoint deck. I was going to like pitch high net worth investors on, okay, so I'll explain to them why Bitcoin is so great, and I'll pitch them. Yeah. Okay. Let's get some money in. But I used to work in wealth management, and I didn't really want to manage other people's money, because I know that, when you manage other people's money, they'll love you when you do well for them, but they'll hate you more than they ever loved you if you lose money for them. And so I didn't actually want to manage people's money. It was just like a thought I had. But I built up this deck, and it was like 80 slides. It ballooned. It was enormous. And I showed it to a friend. He's like, Jesse, you can't actually present this to anyone. It's going to take you 5 hours, but this is a great skeleton for a book.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I don't know. I can't do that. I slept on it. And the next day I woke up and I was like, oh yeah, what else am I going to do with this? Like, this makes perfect sense. And once I made the decision to start turning this deck into a book, I basically obsessed on it for a year. It's all I thought about and worked on for an entire year.
And it's the way that it's presented, I really like, is that literally each page is a thought or an idea.
And that came from the PowerPoint structure. Yeah. The fact that when I started out, when you do a deck, you're presenting one or two, concise points on one slide. So I tried to translate that or put that into the book to just, again, and thinking of Bitcoin as something that's typically viewed as very complex. I thought, well, what if rather than, this run on about, this thing and that thing, and just I'll build one block at a time, one little argument at a time, and you just add to your knowledge little by little by little as you read the book. And because every page has its own title, its own idea, it's very easy to go back and refresh yourself. If you're halfway through the book and I'm referencing something from earlier, you can go back and very quickly figure out, okay, what was that thing again? Oh yeah, what was proof of work again? How does that work? Okay, yeah, I'll read this one page again. Okay, I figured it out. Now I can keep going from where I was.
What I've always maintained, and I've mentioned at the beginning, is like this whole idea, like in the MBTI, Myers-Briggs model, there's intuitives and there's sensors, and intuitives classically get, we are the ones that have big ideas, or we can connect seemingly not interrelated ideas and connect the dots, the puzzle pieces, as you mentioned. Like, these writers are making sense, but they were putting puzzle pieces together that hadn't really been like a coherent idea. And my question to you is like, the early adopters of Bitcoin more intuitive types where they're like, I don't need to go to GitHub and read the code to make sure that it's solid and the security is good. And I don't need to understand nodes, and I don't need to understand like what hash rate is and all that sort of thing. Are those the early adopters, more intuitive types, rather than the sensory types where they need to see historical data? They need to see graphs, charts. They need to see a 5-year chart to make sure that this is a solid investment. They need to see the data. Does that resonate with you? Am I on the right track? What do you think?
So I would say there's sort of two angles or two takes to that. I wasn't around in the very early days, right? Like I only really started dipping my toe into this and started to try to figure it out on my own in 2017. So I thought I was very late at the time, and
yeah,
now it's looking earlier today, but I definitely thought I was late at the time. But if you go back and read on, some of the Bitcoin chat forums earlier, from way back, and some of Satoshi's writings, the cypherpunks, like the group that Satoshi was basically pitching Bitcoin to, were super critical. Even once it was up and running, they were very critical, very hesitant. Not that they didn't want it to work, but that they were trying very hard to point out flaws, and a lot of them thought, oh, this is crazy, it's not going to work. So there were, a couple that definitely, like Hal Finney is one who sticks out, who has seemed very intuitive about it, and who was like latching onto it right away and could see this big picture evolving. And some of his, calls are very prescient. It's actually remarkable. Like, look from where it started to look back today to think of what he wrote back then, it is remarkable. So, you have your small few that probably got the big picture, the Hal Finneys, but the majority were skeptical. And, Bitcoin had to earn the reputation it has, right? Like, I can feel, I feel secure knowing that my Bitcoin is my Bitcoin, that's not going to go anywhere, that no one can take it from me, because it's been built up over all these years. It's been battle tested, battle hardened, right? We have so many people who have gone through so many experiences, and we've, again, part of developing better products for it also helps. But it's gone through so much turmoil, and it just keeps doing exactly what it was programmed to do from day one without fail. Like, it's very simple, but it's very profound, that it can do that. So some people can intuit that and lean on that.
And lean on it. And I think it's so interesting, because I think one of the final pages in your book kind of, I think there's a circle graph where it's like, to me, I interpret it as like, this is where what stage people get in at. Like, for you and for me, I think it was 21 million makes sense. So then it's never, you can't debase your currency by just printing it endlessly. It's like, okay, that's an idea I can latch onto. Some people might have different avenues that they come into Bitcoin. So for you, it was 21 million. It was it's
predetermined schedule. Yeah.
What was the other one?
The predetermined schedule. So set from the beginning, which relates to the 21 million coins. And then that money wasn't free. Like, if you wanted to participate in bringing them into circulation or earn rewards, right, as for the mining fees or transaction fees, pardon me, like, there was a cost to that. You can't just, there's no free money. There's no free lunch in Bitcoin.
There's none of that. And then I think the idea of halving and making it every 4 years harder to, or not harder, but it does become harder, but also you get less of a reward.
Yeah. It's, when Bitcoin was in its first couple of years, yes, the reward was very high, but remember the dollar value, and dollar value isn't even the right term. Let's use purchasing power, right? The purchasing power of Bitcoin was very low. And it's not like everyone who was mining Bitcoin back then was just hoarding it, holding on to it, thinking, well, of course this is going to be worth $50,000 in the future. Like, no, not at all. So it's been distributed. A lot of coins were lost because people thought it wasn't worth much. They didn't really care. It was just difficult to use. So yeah, the halvings, where every 4 years or so, the mining reward, which is part of the 21 million coin arc, it reinforces Bitcoin's scarcity.
Yes.
And it, in a sense, it sort of mimics, I think, and I'm not 100% sure Satoshi wrote something like this, but to me anyway, I'll just say in my opinion, it sort of mimics, gold is hard money, in the sense that, when we first really discovered gold and discovered that, oh, this is a better money, it was more abundant, it was everywhere. And as you get better at digging it out, it gets harder and harder to find, because you're getting the big stashes of it, and and then you're going to more and more remote locations, and it's more costly because you have to go farther to get it. You have to drill deeper to get it. And so Bitcoin's halving chart in effect mimics that essence, that, okay, once we bring money into circulation and we acknowledge that's money, now it's got to be harder and harder to bring more and more online.
Yes. And for some reason, I mean, not for some reason, I know the powers that be at play with this whole, like, now all of a sudden people care about the climate with the energy, and all of a sudden that's like, we're real climate activists now. I don't want to get a response. I'm just kind of being like, it's interesting how there's, like, they say, oh, there's certain things that their critics, like, every year have a thing they harp on, and then the next year that didn't work. It's still going up. Let's try this.
Yeah, the powers that be they're going to be pushing the climate agenda big time in the coming years. That seems pretty obvious.
That seems like an easy one.
Yeah, but Bitcoin is not the problem. Like, this is what a tricky one to wrap your head around. There's no doubt about that. Bitcoin is actually part of the solution to the world's energy.
Bitcoin
issues.
Fixes this, right?
Bitcoin fixes a lot of things,
everything,
whether we want to admit it or not. And it's not always direct. It's going to be indirect effects, but Bitcoin fixes a lot of things. So, I can't eloquently go over all the arguments for why. There's Nick Carter. I don't know if you know who Nick Carter is.
I
NIC,
do, because
not
of you.
NICK.
I started following him, yeah.
So Nick Carter has written a few pieces, like, the final word on Bitcoin's energy consumption, the final word. Like, he keeps going back, because, we keep putting out this FUD of, Bitcoin is consuming all this energy and that's bad. It's no, Bitcoin is driving energy efficiency, and that's good. It's using stranded and wasted energy. It's taking, like, zero value energy that would have been wasted and turning it into gold, basically, turning it into digital gold.
And just from an audience, FUD means fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Yes.
When we say FUD, that's what we mean. Now, I'm a big fan of Max Kaiser. I think him and Stacy are, like, back when I was watching them on RT, got me into, like, just the financial system, and then Bitcoin, and then Max is obviously, like, the biggest maximalist ever.
They're rock stars, yeah.
Yeah. So he has this phrase that's like, you don't change Bitcoin, it changes you. And I want to know, do you think there's like a legitimate spiritual element to Bitcoin?
Yeah, the first couple of years as I was getting in and learning about it, you didn't feel that way at first. It's definitely hit home more and more the last year and a half. Because your habits change. I'm looking more and more towards the future with Bitcoin. It's not so much this myopic mindset. I'm on this hamster wheel. I have to keep having cash coming in so that I can pay all the bills on the back end. It lets you stop and survey the landscape and figure out, okay, I only have so much of this. I have to use it very carefully if I'm going to spend it. What do I want to spend it on that's going to make me happy, that's going to make the world a better place? I want to leave the world better than I found it for, my family that comes after me, all that kind of stuff. You start to think longer and longer term about Bitcoin. And yeah, there's a spiritual sort of connection to it. I'm not probably the best person to go into too much detail on that, but it changes you. And it's for the better. Like, it's definitely for the better. I'm less focused on consuming stuff that I don't need or is really irrelevant. It's, status symbols, whatever. It's less of an issue. It's more about, how do I make the most of what I have, recognizing that time and life is scarce, and Bitcoin sort of mimics that. And so you want to make the most of both of them.
Yeah. And I agree with that. The long-term vision, definitely, like you start to see things in like big, long cycles, or like instead of like next year, it's like the next 20 years, what's it going to look like? And uh, Max has always kind of talked about, I no longer care about politics because once again, Bitcoin fixes all this. It's like, oh, wars, those go away. Oh, all these like government things goes away with Bitcoin. So like he's looking at like, why would I care about the day-to-day minutia of political legislation when Bitcoin is going to quote fix all this, which is funny. What is the next thing you see where it's like the consciousness will be raised and then like you're going to have just everyone getting in? What's that next thing?
Yeah, going through the process of dollars and other fiat currencies really truly becoming worth less and worthless
Yeah.
is something that's going to take, it's still going to take many years. I don't see it just happening in 1 or 2 years.
Okay.
I could, I don't want to give a timeline, but it's I think it's still going to take a while. And for that, politicians and governments, they're still going to have power. It's just, it's going to be different. The balance of power will slowly shift. Ultimately, what that looks like, I think we start to see when we get to a point where maybe the balance more firmly tips to Bitcoin, 51% over into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah, there will be a change in the way we interact socially, the things that we value and work for, and the things that we create, because those who are paying the creators or paying to have stuff created are going to have very different goals and outlooks. They're going to want to build stuff that's going to last, that's meant, that's meant to stand the test of time, that's not just focused on the 2 inches in front of your face. It's
Right.
very long-term vision, right? Like right now, everything is just like right in front of your face. They can't, our politicians can't see more than, a day ahead, basically.
Right.
They have no concept of like what they're doing for our future or how it's going to impact our future. And so Bitcoin really, and, it's a long, crazy argument to explain all that. And I think I've done an okay job in the book of at least introducing readers to that idea or how some of these ideas work. And it's obviously, I spent the year crafting every paragraph and every sentence. So it's different when I just talk about it.
Right.
But again, if you're talking to other Bitcoiners, you see it happening, you feel it happening, and people are really tuning in and getting on the same page and establishing a similar set of values that we can all respect and that makes sense and that honor, humanity and just, yeah, it's a remarkable thing.
It is absolutely remarkable, and could not have come at a better time in like world history. That's also something. It's like world's kind of going to crap. Whoever I think most people would think there's a kind of a downtrend, but then Bitcoin's coming up, so it's like maybe it's just at the perfect time. It's coming.
It is something that Bitcoin came around when it did, and it's maturing when it's like right now, as it's maturing to the degree that it is, that it's happening at this time in world history is, it's hard to think that's coincidental almost,
No.
right? And especially because we don't know where Bitcoin came from, truly. Like, we don't actually know. We know Satoshi invented it, but we don't know who Satoshi is. No. We don't know if Satoshi is one person or multiple people. We basically never will. It seems like we're never going to find out. No. And so there's this very, cosmic, mysterious element to Bitcoin that is really, different and unique. And again, it's one of those things, because it works better in practice almost than in theory. Mm-hmm. Like, it's changing the world while having this, while it has this mysterious origin story. It's stranger than fiction almost, right?
Totally. Advice to someone that wants to dip their toes into Bitcoin in terms of practically owning it or getting it. I mean, obviously, the first thing you got to do, read the book. I mean, that's where you start. But then wallets, exchanges, where do I go? Apps, just some advice for people that are like, all right, I'm sold. What do I do?
Yeah, I think, things like the book are just to get you in the frame of mind of understanding the why for Bitcoin, right? But then it's on every individual to choose that, okay, now I'm going to do something about it, right? If you're sitting around waiting for your investment advisor to tell you it's the right time, you might be waiting a while. And, they may put you in a product that isn't really going to get you the full benefit of Bitcoin. So yeah, the first thing to do, whether you want to go to Swan Bitcoin or Kraken or whatever, and just start buying your first Bitcoin. That's the thing. You don't have to put your whole life savings in. You don't have to put your whole paycheck in. $5 a month, $10 a month.
Mhm.
Pick your time preference that you just want to accumulate little by little. Think of it like, if you were a kid and you got your allowance and you're going to you're going to spend $1 on a chocolate bar. And in this case, chocolate bar might be paying your rent or your mortgage. But then you're going to put another half of it or part of it into the piggy bank. You're just going to put these coins in the piggy bank. And then, when you're going to wake up a year or two later and open the piggy bank, you have all this changes. Okay, now I'm going to go buy something big for myself. Or it's something that, when I come on hard times, I have this store of savings that can carry me through that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So you're paying yourself. Like buying Bitcoin is you're basically paying your future self. Just start, number one, start with in the US specifically, I would recommend Swan Bitcoin.
Right.
Kraken is fine too, but Swan makes it really easy to do dollar cost averaging, which is just every week, every month, every day, pick your interval. You can buy a little bit. And their fees are, I think, the lowest basically in the States.
Mm-hmm.
So they're terrific. And then you start by buying it, but they hold it for when you first buy it. So the next step is actually experience sending Bitcoin over the Bitcoin network. So Swan Bitcoin might have your Bitcoin and you say, okay, I'm going to send it or withdraw it from Swan to a wallet that you control. And you can download apps, whether it's on your desktop or on your phone. Something like Blue Wallet is a very popular, and I think bluewallet.io is the website. It's a very popular, easy to use wallet that lets you take possession of your private keys. And what I mean by private keys, you can think of it as, the password to your Bitcoin.
Right.
Just to keep it simple
No,
for
it is.
listeners.
Pretty much it, yeah.
Private keys is basically the password to your Bitcoin. It's, if you want to go and if someone's going to send you Bitcoin, they need an address, right? So similar to an email, you have an email address.
Right.
If someone's going to send you a letter, they're going to email it to your address. Private keys are like the password to your email address. You log in. Only with the private keys can you read what someone has sent, meaning like, you're receiving it.
Right.
But then you are the only one with that password that can then write a message back or send a new message elsewhere.
That's why it's great when you could just put like a lot of people just have their Bitcoin address as their profiles. Like you can send me, but like that doesn't help. You can't hack me because
it's like posting your email address. Yeah. If I were to put my Bitcoin address on, like you said, whether it's on my Twitter handle or on LinkedIn or whatever, like no one can touch it. People can see what gets sent there. Yes. But no one can move it. No one can do anything about it.
So secure.
It's the Bitcoin network. Like I am not a security expert. I'm sort of a jack of all trades, master of none when it comes to Bitcoin. The security is second to none, like on this planet. The only way to lose your Bitcoin is if you screw up. You would have to do something wrong. You would have to enter a wrong address. Or lose your private key, but it's your responsibility. And that's part of the Bitcoin changes you thing, right? Because with a bank, you're relying on the bank. If you lose your card, if you send money to the wrong bank account, you go through the administrative process, they'll fix it for you. With Bitcoin, there's no such thing. It's all on you. And so learning to take that personal responsibility is part of changing yourself, which is part of changing the culture of this world, which we're often babied a little too much, I think, in this world, and Bitcoin really reinforces that. No, if we all take just a little bit of personal responsibility, we spread the load across everyone, and it's many hands make light work, light work kind of thing.
Absolutely, that's a great phrase.
The way I see the financial world going, like Bitcoin is effectively the new index. Like if you are not going to outcompete Bitcoin, then you might as well just join Bitcoin. And it's going to be really hard to outcompete Bitcoin on its, purchasing power returns. Even starting from 60,000 per coin, I think, going forward with whether you're buying stocks or real estate or bonds or other things, 100%, and not that I'm saying everyone should just go 100% Bitcoin, but a full Bitcoin portfolio versus like a mixed bag of, a balanced portfolio. I feel very confident that Bitcoin's going to continue outperforming, and that over time, people are going to realize, especially with, the way money could work. And I have to say could, but the way money could work if it was truly scarce, if Bitcoin was the dominant money, Bitcoin would be everyone's baseline. When you're not sure what to do, you have this value saved up, you earn some money, you'll save it in Bitcoin. You're not going to rush out to the stock market. You're not going to rush out to dump it into real estate because it doesn't burn a hole in your pocket. Cash burns a hole in your pocket because it's losing value. Bitcoin doesn't have that same effect. So it's easy to say, okay, I'll actually save money. Because today when we say saving money, people think you're still investing. Like investing in itself is not saving money. It's putting money to work.
Right.
I want just to save money. Bitcoin lets me do that. I don't have to invest. I'm not active. Just sitting on it is the active thing.
It's amazing. Jesse Berger, the book is Magic Internet Money, a book about Bitcoin. Let me just say, it is a quick read of, what's the exact amount? 127 pages with an index at the end of all the terms and phrases you need to know. 1 page per idea, super easy to reference and go back and forth. Recommend it to anyone in my audience who's like, all right, Joe, I'm gonna look, I'm gonna buy this book. So, Jesse, thanks so much for being here. Hope the audience connects with you. Everyone connect with Jesse and learn more about Bitcoin.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Joe.
I tried to live without you, just can't get you.